Hello again, everyone. This is Joe Hentges with Beyond the Chart. In this technical analysis of the stock market video, I'm going to take a look at the Nasdaq, the VIX, three key market ETFs, the semiconductors, home builders, and banks, and then check in on copper and Freeport McMoran, the number 2 copper producer in the world. So stay tuned. All right, let's start off here with the Nasdaq on a daily basis. You can see, I believe, according to Elliott wave count, that we've got 5 minor waves up. The 5th minor wave either ended here or here, and it's in a rising wedge that I believe this week it broke down out of that wedge. We've got the 10 exponential moving average crossing below the 21. Now, it did it back over here, didn't hold, but on this move, we got a trend line break in here. So what does this pattern mean? Well, there's a couple things going on. I think this is the 5th and final intermediate wave up, which means this could very well be the top for the Nasdaq. No guarantees, but that's the way it looks to me. Now, if we go over and take a look at the weekly chart for the Nasdaq, here you see the pattern on a weekly basis, and I've got the 5th intermediate wave labeled up here. Here's how this week's price action looks. Now we've come back down and we're closing the moving 52.19. Yeah, we're closing just a few points below the 10-week moving average, and we're breaking down out of this wedge. Very similar to when we broke down out of this wedge. Now this wedge looks a little bit different than this, but they both were ending diagonals. Okay, now what happened over here? 2-week breakdown, a snapback pullback up into the wedge, and then it collapsed. Now, the same thing could happen here. We could get a snapback or we might not. But the one thing that's characteristic about wedges and ending diagonals like this is that many times they will fall very quickly down to the bottom of the wedge. Now, over here, it didn't quite get to the bottom, which I would have expected to be down here, but it came pretty close and it did it pretty quick. All right, so that's the Nasdaq. Let's take a look at the VIX. The VIX on Friday went down just a little bit, but you can see here's the picture for the week. We got above the 10-day moving average again and started rising, and here we've got a short-term moving average cross to the upside. I drew this trend line across the top here because I think if we come up and break this, we're going to spike again and probably spike above this high over here at 2051. And once volatility starts kicking in above 20, things really start getting, the fireworks really start happening. Let's take a look at our 3 market ETFs. The semiconductors, they continue to stay strong. Now, we had a big outside down week here, and look how the trading range was outside the range of the last 3 weeks, and we closed down. Now, this is actually closed just a little bit below the midpoint of this bar, so it's not super bearish. But I'd say the positive thing is it continues to trend above the 10-week moving average in here. It hasn't broken down yet, so they're staying still fairly strong. On the other hand, the home builders, they are breaking down. They breaking this trend line. The 10-week moving average is crossing below the 21. So the home building industry is looking fairly weak right now. And when we go over and take a look at our banks, the banks this week had a somewhat negative looking candle. And I would say the price action, think about how this closed the previous week. Closed up near the high. Then it opens on Monday, gaps up, doesn't go anywhere, and then sells off all week long and closes below, or actually traded below the range of the previous week and then closes down for the week. So pretty negative looking price action in here, but again, it's not closing below the 10. We don't have a couple of weeks below the 10. It hasn't quite broken down yet, but you can see that there was some pretty good resistance came in when it got up here above 37.70, which was the high back here of the week ending September 2nd. All right, so that's the banks. Let's take a look at copper, which was down about close to 2.5% this week. I'm looking at the copper futures. Okay, this is the electronic continuous chart of the electronic futures contract. So it just shows, you know how the futures contracts always have a specific month expiration to them, and a continuous contract just blends all of those contracts together. So here's the big downtrend that copper has been in since back here in February 2011. So what's the picture? What's going on right now? I mean, we've got some sideways, like a symmetrical triangle that's happening. And here's the week's action here this week. So it looks like it's heading down again. Excuse me. But until this really breaks out of this symmetrical triangle, you're just really not quite sure which way it's going. Although my tendency is to believe that the overall direction of this market is the direction that the breakout's going to go out of this triangle. Okay, so why is copper important? Copper's a key ingredient in the global economy in terms of building and expansion and economic expansion, and especially around the globe, in China and other places. And so when this continues to head south, it's just a picture that Dr. Copper is just not happy and not indicating that anything's strong. So we look at this picture and you think, well, okay, well, we've come down a long way. How much lower can copper really go? Well, copper can go a lot lower, and copper has been a lot lower. And here's where it was in 2008, all the way down $1.2, $1.26, $1.30. And here we're sitting up here at 210. So yes, it can go a lot lower. And right now the trend, the channel trend is to the downside. So let's take a look at Freeport McMoran. And Freeport on a daily basis looks like it's rolling over. We've had this counter trend move. It's broken this big trend line. I'll look at that on a weekly chart here in a minute. But it could be, it looks like after it's got this counter trend move, it looks like it's topping out, broke this trend line here, and seems to be rolling over. Now the real key, and we got the moving averages aligning to the downside, the key is, does it get any kind of support at all in here, like say around 8.5, in the 8.5 to 9, slightly below where it is right now. Well, I guess I'd have to say, right, it looks on a short-term basis like it wants to continue to head down. Now, when we look at the weekly chart, here's all the trading I've got on Freeport McMoran. So you can see this large trend line from down in the year 2000, hitting the 2008 low, and it smashed through that in 2015. And you think, well, okay, maybe we're putting in a big bottom, and it's possible. And I really thought that there was the potential in here for a big head, a shoulder, head, and another shoulder forming. But then it broke down. It broke back down. It started closing below the 10-week moving average again. It broke back down like this, and we got the moving average cross, and it didn't go. And so now I feel like this is a little bit of a failed head and shoulders look to me, and this looks like it's starting to sell off again. Now this close that we've got in here, where is this close? This close is the lowest close since all the way back over here in April, the week ending April 8th, 6 months. So I think that's pretty significant. We need some continuation if it's truly going to close, head on down to the downside like this. But right now, you look how it's just staying below the 10-week moving average and wanting to trend that way. So that's the picture right now on Freeport McMoran. Let me go back and take a look at the daily one more time. Seems like I was one more thing I was going to mention about it, but I can't think of it at the moment. Well, that's the picture. All right, that's it for this week. If you felt like the video was helpful, hit the like button and share it with your friends. All right, everyone, have a great week. We'll talk to you on the next video.